Avengers Standoff Assault on Pleasant Hill is an event that took place in Marvel Comics back in 2016. It consists of 16 different issues with a range of titles being tied into it, like the New Avengers, All New, All Different Avengers, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, and a couple of others. And here over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be releasing some videos going over each one of these issues. I hope you all will join me as I recap these issues and fill you all in on exactly what happened, and at the end of it, maybe I'll do a longer format video or even a live stream talking about everything that's happened, everything we learn about as I recap this series, and maybe, just maybe, if there's any implications of this, something that we could look into, looking forward into the MCU with all of the things that are currently going on and what happens in this book. So please, if you will, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and make sure you follow the playlist, because this will be available on a playlist. Make sure that you follow the playlist so you can come back and watch all of these videos. Let's get into this. What's up everybody, Trinity here, and welcome back to the Second Street Marvel. Today we are talking about Avengers Standoff, Welcome to Pleasant Hill, the first story kicking off the Avengers Standoff Assault on Pleasant Hill storyline. Let's go ahead and get right into the story. Now here at the beginning we see Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, who has been in outer space filling in Nick Fury's shoes as the man on the wall, charged with protecting humanity from cosmic level threats. And one day his systems lit up with an alert signifying the biggest, most catastrophic event so far. And that's kind of what brought him back to Earth, and that's why he's here infiltrating the S.H.I.E.L.D base. And he ends up using Steve Rogers' passwords to access this mainframe to be able to check out the surveillance footage from what had happened the day of this catastrophic event. And he's viewing it on this big projector on the wall there, and he sees that they have a bunch of cosmic cube fragments there in this facility, and they are experimenting on them. And they had just some tests that had failed due to interference from some gamma radiation being put off by these cosmic cube fragments, and they end up kind of triggering a response from all these fragments together and cause quite an explosion. And this is that catastrophic event that had brought Bucky here back to Earth. But as he's sitting there watching the footage, he sees that there is this this little girl there, and just saying, "Want to be safe." And he's sitting there looking like, why is this a recording? But it feels like I'm looking at this little girl. And he kind of lets his guard down, and the next thing you know, he's surrounded by a bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D agents. The story then opens up here where we see it's a nice sunny day, and we see there is a young man who is being woken up by the sheriff in the town named Eva. She's asking him if he knows his name or anything, because he doesn't seem to have ID or anything. And he doesn't seem to recall where he's at and how he got there or what he's doing there. And she tells him, you know, not to worry about it. She'll go ahead and get him into town because this happens to hikers all the time out there. You know, they take falls. And, you know, she said worst case scenario, Dorothy will have to put him up for the night until, you know, he remembers who he is, or until they can get him to a better facility. So, you know, and he's curious. He's not sure where he's at. And she tells him that he is in Pleasant Hill. So she gets him there to this facility there to be checked out. And he's sitting there being checked out by the nurse, who is kind of taking all of his vitals and everything. And he's curious to what's going on, so he asks for the doctor. And in walks Dr. Eric Selvig. This young man is getting very angry and just wants to know where he is, and he wants to go to a hospital. And the doctor tells him, well, you just take it easy. The nearest one is over an hour away, and it's probably not the best idea to transport him right now, just in the condition that he's in. And just tells him to relax, that they'll get him some help. And you know, so he leaves him there in the room all alone. And then the young man, he's getting curious, he's getting antsy, so he decides to get up and leave. And that's when he comes across this door with the little office open, and he hears the nurse and Eric Selvig in there having a conversation about this young man and why he don't remember some of these things that he's supposed to remember, and maybe how there's a glitch in this programming. And being freaked out by hearing this, he ends up taking off, and the doctors hear him kind of just scurrying around there in the hall. And he turns around, and there are some S.H.I.E.L.D. agents actually blasting these rays at him that end up making him pass out. And he ends up waking up the next day in a room in a house, in a strange house that he has no clue once again where he is at. So he wakes up and starts moving about, and that's when he is met by Dorothy Bixby, who is the proprietor of this establishment, this bed and breakfast that he's staying at. And she says, hey, the doctor told me what's wrong with you. I understand, it happens. Go ahead and go outside, get some fresh air, maybe, walk around. Maybe that'll help jog your memory. So he goes around, starts walking around this little town that looks just like, a small, little, nice town, just any town USA. And has come across, different people. He sees there are people playing out in the park, kids playing. He comes across a couple of cute girls. There's a local radio station with music playing over a PA system there in town. And he's just, he's kind of dazed, by everything going on here. He's kind of confused and can't quite make sense of it all. And he ends up walking across the street and almost gets hit by a car. The guy gets out and apologizes, and he ends up knocking the guy over and stealing his car and trying to make a getaway. And the police are immediately on him, trying to pull him over. And he makes his way out of town and ends up getting in a car crash. Well, he crawls out of the car and tries to get away on foot, and comes to a barrier, a wall that's an invisible barrier. And he kind of curious, and he starts looking around, and he ends up seeing a Stark truck there, and ends up running into more agents. Then once again, he wakes up the next day, but this time he is strapped to the bed with the nurse and Dr. Eric Selvig, saying the restraints are temporary, but they're just for his own good. And they're just telling him, like, in time that he'll grow to enjoy it there. Then we fast forward to day 19 with this young man, Jim, who has become known as, I guess, this name he has taken on, with the therapist asking him how he's feeling, and he's telling the therapist, that he feels much better, and that these sessions are actually doing some good. The therapist is sitting there questioning him, and then asking him, like, well, are you gonna make any more attempts to escape? And he just kind of says, well, I don't do that anymore. And we get these flashbacks of some of the days past that he had got, going day 4, day 7, and then day 12. And he's saying, I don't do that anymore. And he's like, okay, great. He's like, well, what changed? What is it that changed? And he's like, it was this day last week. I was walking through the park, and he came across this young girl, and she was all sitting there on her own, and she was sitting there looking at this bird that had stopped flying. And he says, you should get away from that, it's dead. And she's telling him, no, dummy, it's just waiting for its purpose. That's what makes us special. And he's like, what are you talking about, purpose? And she's like, asking him about his new life, and if he likes it there, and if he's happy. And he says that he can't say that he is happy. And she says, it's because you can't remember stuff, right? She goes, but that's what was wrong with you. You were always stuck in the past. You could never enjoy the present, could never find your purpose. So I gave you a new one. And he says, purpose? And she says, that's what this place is for. Everybody finds out what's so great about them. Then someday they can leave and go do nice stuff out there. And then she touches the bird, and it takes off flying. And that's when Dr. Eric Selvig ends up walking in on them, thanking him. He was looking for this young girl. and he ends up taking her away. And that's when we see the young man still talking to this therapist and saying, this place is important. He says, I may not know who I am or where I came from, but I know where I am today, and I know that this place is my home now. Then we fast forward to day 36, and we find him sitting there on the roof of, I'm assuming, Miss Bixby's house, fixing the roof up, just doing some patchwork as the neighbors walking by saying hi. He notices that there is a fire in his neighbor's house, so he takes off to go check out this fire and make sure everything's okay. Finds out that this neighbor, Patricia, her house had caught on fire and that her baby was still inside, so he goes inside to save the baby. But while he's in there, he hears a strange voice. He ends up getting the baby to safety, and he runs back in the house. And they ask him, as he's running back in, like, hey, where are you going? And he says, there's someone else in there. So he goes in there, and he finds this guy in the kitchen. And he's saying, hey, man, like, let's get out of here. And he's like, well, yeah, sure. This guy's got his face covered with a bandana. And he's like, sure thing, but I want to have a conversation first. And he's like, well, come on, let's just get out of here. He goes, he's like, who are you anyway? And he goes, he's telling him he's someone who knows the truth about this place. And he's like, dude, we got to get out of here. He's like, nah, it'll hold because according to where I set the fire, the structure should be good. And he's like, you set this fire? He's like, yeah. And he's like, anyway, he goes, He's like, I've wanted to tell you about this place. He's like, everything here is fake. It's an illusion. And he goes, this whole place is fake. He said, all these people, they made us think that we have different lives, have different thoughts, and things like that. He goes, but you're different. He says, you don't have any memories. And the guy, this guy's telling me, he's like, it doesn't matter. And the guy tells him, he says, you keep telling yourself, he says, but there's some part of you that can still feel these chains around your wrists. And if you are who I think you are, they won't keep you in prison for long. And so he tells him that in the basement of this bed and breakfast that he is staying at, there's a little tunnel that leads to this storage shed in the park. And if he leaves at 4 a.m., he has 3 minutes to get there because that's when their systems reboot. So 3 days later, Jim is sitting there being honored by the city, receiving a medal for saving this child's life. And this prestigious award gets him a meeting with the mayor of Pleasant Hill, who is Maria Hill. Well, Maria Hill gets Jim into her office, and she's sitting there talking to him and kind of making small talk, and she just kind of flips it on him and says, who else was in the house? And Jim's kind of confused, and he's asking her what? And she's saying, the day that, you went and saved the baby, who else was in there? And he says, oh, I was just hearing things. And not believing him, she's basically shaking him down, and she tells him that she wants him to take the night to think about his statement and come back tomorrow with something new to tell her with the name of who was in that house. So he wakes up the next morning at 4 o'clock, and he makes way for that tunnel, and he gets through the tunnel and comes to the end of it, to this shed where he meets this man who is there, who's telling him that he's a prisoner just like he is. And so he begins telling him that he said this man that he's meeting is telling him they made him think that his name was Phil, and that he had moved here to take this job in this garage. And he was telling him that their mistake was that in the memories, they made him believe that he was a mechanic and that he loved building things and repairing things. And so he started just building these things that he had never seen before. He didn't know how he was doing it. It was like he was in a trance, kind of like he was sleepwalking. And he was like, when he would make these things, it made him scared. So he would immediately destroy them. And he said, and then one day he built this device that showed him who he really is. And he's sitting there showing Jim this device. And Jim's wanting answers. He wants to know what this device is, what it does, and who he is. And this guy that we know as Phil right now is telling him, he's like, well, okay, easy, but I want to show you this video first. So he goes to show him this video, and what it is, it ends up being a training video with Maria Hill, who is kind of introducing herself as the S.H.I.E.L.D. director and kind of it's kind of like a video that she would give new recruits, new people who are being hired on, and she's showing them around Pleasant Hill about what it is and what they'll be hired doing, and what this program is. And she shows them Graviton, who is here, who is a criminal who is being incarcerated in Pleasant Hill. And they're using Kobik to change him. So what they do is they put him in this machine, and it changes his appearance and his memories of who he is. Graviton is now known as Howie Howardson, and he looks different, has a completely different life. And he's getting ready to open their first French fusion restaurant in Pleasant Hill. And so that's kind of what she's saying they're doing, is protecting or keeping an eye on all of these convicts who have now had their reality changed. And also the final words are that if they ever see this child, who is basically this girl who is now the sentient being known as Kobik, if they ever see her unattended, they are to alert authorities immediately. And as the video is going on, this guy Jim, this young man Jim, says, "Turn it off." He's had enough of seeing this. He's like, "Show me who I am." And so he says, "Okay, there's more to show you." And he's like, "No, just show me who I am." And this guy Phil says, "Okay, well, here goes nothing." And he turns on the machine, and it begins to warm up. And he's saying, he's like, "Are you here you go. Do you remember?" And the guy wakes up and he says, "Yes, I remember everything." And he ends up telling him, he says, "Welcome back, Baron Zemo." And Baron Zemo is standing there saying, "Thank you, Fixer. Thank you. Your service here will be rewarded." And so they go ahead and, he asks them what their plans are. And they say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to set more prisoners free. And then they're going to wait for their moment to strike and turn Pleasant Hill into a graveyard. And they will do it in front of the whole world. And he wants to know more about who this child is. And that is where this story leaves off. And I'm telling you, the introduction to this whole assault on Pleasant Hill is just great. Welcome to Pleasant Hill is just one of my favorite stories here. Just kicking off this event. I really like everything that's going on here, especially the way it ends with that reveal of Baron Zemo being the prisoner that was revealed to be the one brought in. Because at first, the way the story kicks off, it makes it seem like it's Bucky Barnes. And I don't know. I like this series and the way it is. But let's talk down in the comments below. What did you think about this story? Have you ever read Avengers Assault on Pleasant Hill? Welcome to Pleasant Hill. Let's talk about it down in the comments below. That's all I have for this video today, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Second Street Marvel. If you're not already, please make sure you subscribe, click the little bell and all of that good stuff. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down. It's all good. I don't look that much into it, but make sure that you share it with a friend and invite them to come hang out with us here on the Second Street Marvel, because we're going to be going over all the rest of these stories here in this trade paperback. We're going to be doing videos on them, so make sure you stay tuned to the playlist, and we'll see you in the next video. Later.